a.m. Morning. Advocating for yourself. Right? Today we're going to have a conversation about advocating for yourself. Now I'm going to talk about it in terms of the medical system, but I want you to think about this in terms of advocating across the board. Right? So you may have seen my other post. If you haven't, hashtag 100 days of transplant. Basically yesterday was 100 days since the big fella had his kidney transplant. Today it is 101 days. Right? Advocating for yourself is an interesting space to be when it comes to the medical system. Right? So the big fella has had no problems because he has had multiple his chronic illness. So he's been a part of the health system for quite some time. His kidney had been failing over the years, and he'd had cancer and a heart attack. So he'd been a part of the medical system for quite some time. The big fella is also very secure in himself in being able to have a voice about what works for him and what doesn't, and asking those questions. When you become a part of the health system, however, when you ask those questions and advocate for yourself, a lot of times you can be labelled as complicated, you can be labelled as frustrating, you can be labelled as somebody who is continually like pushing the envelope, argumentative, like that sort of thing. Like you can be labelled as that, right? And so the example that I'll give is the big fella spent 10 days in hospital because his kidney function basically just plummeted. And they were very, very worried. He'd had a biopsy. The biopsy started a whole chain of events that ended up with him spending 10 days in the hospital. And during that time, he came out of hospital, went back into hospital, came out, right? So one of the things was that he got some sort of a bug as well. Could have got it while he was in hospital, but I'm not quite sure. So then had to come back to the hospital and went to the emergency. From emergency, went to one of the holding wards. They call it, like the sort of like a departure lounge, but you just get there, so it's not really the departure lounge. And then from there, they sort of send you out into one of the wards. And so when we got into emergency, somebody come out because they'd already rung ahead because it was quite high risk, very high risk. So by the time he got into the emergency, they were like, yep, we know you're coming. Went up to the next ward. From there, hung around, like, just hospitals are not quiet places, right? And so the doctor come along, and she said, like, we have no idea what's going on, which is always incredibly reassuring, right? When the doctor says we've got nothing, right? We don't even know. But she said, just hang out here for a while. I was like, okay, that's fine. Then next minute, this young nurse comes along, nice guy, right? Comes along, and he's like, right, we're taking you to the ward. A big pardon? Yeah, no, you're going to the ward. I'll need to put like a cannula in first because they're going to give you a drip, and then you're going to go to the ward. And the big fella's like, sleigh roll. Who said that? Where am I going? What ward? What's happening? Why do I need fluids? Like, can somebody have a conversation? And this young fella's like, oh, I don't know. I'm following orders. And the big fella's like, that's great. Follow your orders and tell me what's going on. So then went up to the ward. He said, I'll get the doctor, because obviously, like, somebody made that decision, right? So went up to the ward where he spent the week, and the nurse come along and said, oh, you're not really happy. And he's like, nobody's telling me what's going on. Like, why am I here? Obviously, I'm not unwell, I'm not well, so I'm here. He's talking about it, putting in the drip. Like, who made that decision? Because in the 15 minutes that we got here, somebody's had that decision, but nobody's telling me, and I'm not okay unless you tell me what's going on. And so then the doctor came, explained the whole thing. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Could have saved that frustration, right, by telling that in the first place. However, on his notes, it was that he's very frustrated. He's very vocal about his frustration. I think there was something in there along the lines of asks a lot of questions and those sort of things, right? Which is, again, really interesting because we're going to a hospital and advocating for ourselves to then say, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? You're not coming near me with anything unless you tell me what's happening. And so we did that pretty much all the way along, right? And so they would come and administer his medications, and he's on a lot of medications, right? He's on 3 of the most important medications, which is the anti-rejection medication, right? So the anti-rejection medication is the most important because obviously that stops the kidney from rejecting, right? The body rejecting the kidney ain't nobody's happy place there. So that's one of the most important. Well, the doctor had charted the incorrect amount for one of the 3. So, like, because I bring his medications, right? Because I'm always asking, what is this? What is this going on? What is this? What's happening here? And they're like, oh no, like you can trust us. We're just going to, we're not trusting people. Like, not when it comes to medications and stuff. Like, we don't trust anybody, right? We don't trust people at the best times. Comes to medication, hell no. So anyway, so then she says, oh, we're giving him 2 milligrams of tacrolimus, it's called. 2 milligrams of tac. So it's supposed to be 6. Oh, this is a young nurse. Not her fault, right? Oh, well, the doctor charted it too. I don't know what the doctor is smoking. It's supposed to be 6. If they've changed it, there needs to be a conversation because when we leave here, I have to pack the medications. So like we need to know what's going on. If you've changed it, that means that the TAC is too high. So his TAC level is too high, needs to be dropped. We need to have a conversation because if the TAC level is too high, that can impact the kidney function, right? We're here because the kidney's not functioning well. Like it all comes in together, right? And so then they're like, oh, okay, we'll go and do it. And then they changed it and stuff. And then so it was like, okay, so we're going to administer it. And so then it's like, on the notes, self-administering medications because does not trust the hospital. No, we don't trust the hospital because like they take care of you and they can make you sick at the same time because they're literally giving you the wrong thing. And so they've changed all these medications and stuff, right? They had antibiotics because he wasn't well and like all of the things, right? They changed one of the medications that they wanted him to stop taking and didn't tell us that they wanted him to stop. So we would alternate. I would give him the medication, and if they came to give him medication and I wasn't there, he'd take the hospital. They changed one of the medications and didn't tell us. Oh, don't take that anymore. And so one of the registrars come along, right? And she was like, we just happened to say, because they were trying to they think part of the reason they tried to get a lot of fluid off him too quickly and his body just went into malfunction and said, we're hanging on to everything. And then the kidney might have been dehydrated. And so they're trying to come up with all these things. So they had him on a fluid tablet to get rid of the fluid. They didn't tell us to stop taking said fluid tablet. So this registrar just happened to say, oh, Brian had been losing a lot of fluid, which was great. Happened to say, obviously the fluid tablet's working, and she's like, you're not supposed to be on fluid tablets. It's like, well, nobody said don't take fluid tablets. Like nobody said in any of those things that he shouldn't be taking it because it's there. Well, that's not really what we wanted. Well, can you communicate that to us? Like we need to have a conversation. So then the big doctor came in because we were like, we need to find out what's going on here. Like you being argumentative with us is not helpful because we don't play that game. And and the big fella's like, if you're making changes to my medication, you need to tell me because this is my body. I know me and I want to know what's happening with me, right? So then she went and she got all up in her feelings, and then she went and got the big dog, and he come in and he's like, yeah, no, we wanted to keep you wet. Okay, that's fine. Like, don't try to get the fluid off. Just let it sit there for a bit so that the kidney doesn't think that it's going to dehydrate. The thing about continuing to advocate for yourself is you're going to be seen as argumentative. You're going to question things people are going to say, particularly because the nurses would do a handover and they would say, you'd hear them out in the hall saying he asks a lot of questions. He self-administers a lot of things. He likes to know what's happening. Like doesn't everybody? Like when my father was in hospital and he in palliative care, my brother would sit with him, and before they would come in, he would say, "Who are you? What are you doing? why are you doing this? You know, whether it's taking blood sugar or whatever, like, what is this thing? Don't just come in and be like, hi, you know, like, give me your finger. Well, no, what are you doing? Oh, I need to test your blood sugar. Well, you need to be asking. Like, consent is an incredibly important thing, and advocating for yourself. So this is just in the medical system, right? So this is just the medical stuff. But this is across the board. When you ask questions about what's going on for you, you are likely to be seen as argumentative, bossy, uncooperative, like all of those things. Because when we don't go along, and you can still agree and go along with things, but generally when you ask those questions, you are seen as somebody who is going against what is a genuine flow. Now, we had in the room next to, like, you know, there's two people to a room, the amount of people who came through that over the time that he was in hospital, who the doctors would just come in and say something to them or do something, and they would have no idea, and then they wouldn't ask those questions, and then when the doctor would go, they would be like, I wonder what that was about. Oh, I wonder what they're going to do now. Oh, no. When the doctor come in, there would be questions. Why are you doing this? What does this mean? And then what's the next step? And what if that doesn't work? And what is your backup plan? And how did you come to this? And really, what was your reasoning for that? And then, so if that happens, what does that mean for that? And so then you've done this. Why are you going? Like, we would ask all of the questions. Like, I ask lots of questions because I need to know a couple of steps ahead. When I was a part of the leadership program, right, my little team Grit, who I love to death to this day, I was literally one of those people that needed to know where we're going. I can't just follow you blindly, but I will follow you if I know where I'm going. So they would literally say, Karen, we're going from here to that hill over there. Okay, great. Karen, after that hill, we're going to that hill. When we get to that hill, be like, okay, Karen, we're going from there to there. Because, like, I was struggling. It was hard. Like, it wasn't an easy thing at all. But literally, I would follow them to the death. If they were like, Karen, we're going to go from here to there, and we're going to die trying. That's it. I thought I was going to die several times. Right? So the thing is, ask the question. Be okay to ask that question. Be okay to be like, you know what? Need to know what's happening here. Because at the end of the day, they send you home. You are a cog in that wheel. So you need to know what's happening with you. Don't go home and then be thinking, oh, jeez, I wonder what that was about. I wonder why that. No, we know. Like, we have. And asking those questions. So the big fella is carrying about 6 kilos of fluid at the moment. So he is fluid heavy, so that the kidney has a little bit of time to maybe reabsorb, to be not thinking that it's going to dry out, right? It's kind of like drowning it at the moment. So he's carrying 6 kilos of fluid, which is a lot. And from that means that his breathing sometimes is a bit labored because there's so much. They're testing his lungs every day to make sure that it's, you know, doesn't sit there, all that sort of stuff. We're aware of what that carrying extra fluid means, though. So we are aware that when the breathing is a little bit labored, it doesn't mean something else. It means this. And so we're aware of it because we ask that question. So what does that mean? You know, like, so being okay to ask those questions. I literally would ask maybe 20 or so questions every time the doctor would, and they would do their rounds every day, can I tell you? And I would have those questions. I'm pretty sure they left us until last because I was always the one that was asking, what's the question? So what does this mean? Why are you doing that? Where did you get to that? Okay, so what does that mean for that? Right, okay. So, you know, they think one of the arteries might be narrowed, so that means that he might have to go back to Sydney for them to open that. So what does that mean? Would they have known that at the beginning? Is that something that happens over time? Will that happen again? How come they didn't catch it already? Why didn't the ultrasound pick that up? Does the ultrasound suck? Does that what that means? No? Okay. So, like, asking all of those questions is so incredibly important because it's you or it's your loved one. You can ask those questions. You know, even if you're uncomfortable, ask the question. Because asking the question and having the answer is better than having the question inside with no answer. And if they don't answer it the way you want, ask it again or ask it a different way. And some doctors are better and happier in answering questions than others. Right? A lot of times the nurses would come around and they would give him something and he'd be like, what's this for? Who jarred this? They'd be like, I don't know. You need to go and find out. It's not you, but you need to go and find out what this is about, whether it's an antibiotic or like whatever, something for nausea, like whatever it was. He would take it, but he would not just blindly pop something that they didn't tell him what it was for. Well, here is this thing. What is this thing? What are the thing that you give me? Who made that decision? Will that have an impact on all of the other medications? Right? Advocate for yourself is so incredibly important because nobody else is going to. That's the thing. Unless you have somebody there whose role it is to advocate. And you can do it without being overly nasty. Like, I'm not saying, advocate like you're growling at people. Being okay to ask the question. And the people that you're asking, because them little nurses come in, like, they're just doing their job. Like, it's not them. And they'd be like, well, you need to go and ask a question because I'm not taking that till you tell me. Till you tell me who charted it. Why did they chart it? Are there any side effects? Well, what is this? Because, again, he's had 2 medications that he started taking. Huge side effect of him. Thought he was having a heart attack. Like, it was not a fun time, let me tell you. So being okay to advocate for yourself is the most important because nobody else is going to advocate for you. No one is going to ask those questions that are in your head unless they're a mind reader and they have that same question as well. But you need to be okay to ask the question. You need to be okay to advocate wherever that is. I'm using this example in the health system, but this is advocating for yourself across the board. No one's going to give you that thing. No one's going to give you that seat at the table. Very few people are going to speak your name in rooms you're not in. You need to advocate for yourself to get there. If they do that, that's fantastic. Most people don't get that opportunity until you get to that space where you are at that level where people will speak your name, but you generally need to get to that level before people start speaking your name. The advocating for yourself comes before that. Putting yourself out there, naming yourself as that, putting yourself forward for things, having that voice when sometimes it is the scariest thing to have that voice. We're now at that point that we don't care. Like if they don't like those questions, that's okay. You can be all up in your feelings at another point in time. This is actually about the best healthcare for the big fella. Right? This is about making sure that we know what's going on because everywhere we go, there we are. And we need to be able to say to the next doctor, this is what's going on. Because when we were in Sydney, and there's a reasoning for this, right? But when you had the transplant in Sydney, every day that you go in, every single day, going in, having a blood test, going up to the clinic, they tell you how it's going, they track it, the wound care, all that sort of stuff, right? So he was there for 2 weeks, I think, 2 weeks before we came back here. They write a letter of discharge which has all of the medications and stuff on it, right? However, every day that you go in and have your blood test, because the hospitals in Sydney can test for everything every day, here in Canberra they test for TAC twice a week. I don't know. We're a national capital. We can only test one of the main big one twice a week because some of the blood people get themselves all up in a tizzy if you have to test it on another day, like a national capital. Okay. Anyways, so they would change that, right? So they would change the medication level every day. Drop it, increase it, drop it, increase it. Like they would just continually. So the letter that they wrote, the actual medications were different to the little card that I had because every time we'd go in, they'd make a change. I'd change it on the card. It became the Bible. So when we came back here, the thing that they had was completely different, right? So then they would say, oh, you're on, 8 milligrams of TAC. No, it's 9 or it's 12 or it's 7 or it's like whatever. Oh, it's different to this. This is the Bible. This is the thing right here. Right? So if we had have left it and trusted, we would have been having completely different, dangerously different, like that's the thing, dangerously different medication levels, rather than saying, no, this is what it is here, this is how much it takes, this is what it's on, and then every time they would change it, I would make a note of it because, again, I was packing his medication, so I needed to know. So when we would go back in, they now have my health record where it's got everything. That was actually incorrect. So if we'd have left it, it would have been dangerous for him because the levels of medication were a lot higher. And so the advocating for yourself became very important because if we leave it to chance to somebody else, then the control that we have over our lives becomes in the hands of somebody else. And then if something had have happened because of the different medication levels, we're going to say, oh, well, that was their fault. We can be like, why are you doing that? If something obviously could happen, but we were going to be controlling what we could control. And the thing that we could control is basically the medication. So I wanted to just share that with you because there's reasonings for this. Start advocating in small ways. Start to advocate where it's most scary. The place where you go, oh, you know, that little, like it gets me because I'm not sure. Start there. Start advocating in those spaces because that's probably where you need it the most. Where is the thing that's most important? Because most people will advocate for somebody else before they advocate for themselves. So my suggestion to you is to advocate for yourself. Okay? Let me know how that is. I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye.